Hey everyone, good morning. I'm sitting here with Dr. Michelle Bengtson, Dr. B online if you follow her socials, which I recommend that you do. And we're going to talk for just a few minutes about rest and our brains and what happens up there when we don't get enough rest. So, Dr. Bengtson, how would you, first of all, let's just start with something that is kind of foundational. How would you distinguish rest from sleep?
So sleep is when your body shuts down and has a chance to restore. Sleep is crucial because sleep is actually when our brain regenerates all the muscle, all the chemicals, all the neurotransmitters in our brain. So when we skimp on sleep, we are actually skimping on our brain's ability to naturally regenerate all those things that we need to be able to function during the day. And when we sleep, some of us are more restful sleepers than others, but rest is more of an intentional, I'm setting things aside. I'm going to take time to intentionally rejuvenate. And rest can be as short as 5 minutes, sitting back in your chair, turning on some music, closing your eyes, and just not being engaged, if you will. So, sleep can be restful, but rest outside of sleep is just as important. But what's real important to keep in mind is that so many of us in today's culture where we are praised for doing, we sacrifice rest because we think, oh, I'll get to that, almost like it's an optional when I get this done and this done and this done. And people have a tendency to think that they can kind of outsmart the system by trying to do multiple things at once. And your brain is only capable of attending to one thing at a time. So it's better to focus on one thing, take a break, then focus on the next thing, take a break and rest, focus on the next thing. Because when we think about multitasking, we think, oh, well, I can be signing the permission slip at the same time that I'm reading an email, at the same time that I'm listening to the news. But really, what your brain is doing is stopping to start focus on the next thing, stopping to focus on the next thing. So think of it as kind of like being in traffic and you're starting and stopping because of the traffic in front of you, but you're not really getting very far. It's the same way when we don't rest. You're not going to be as productive in what you want to get done, and you're not giving yourself the chance to rejuvenate, which is crucial for sustainability.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. I could ask you 5 questions just off of that. It sounds like what you're saying with the rest sleep thing is that rest is more of a settled, I'm going to kind of unhook from the worries of my day.
Yeah,
Sleep is sleep.
right.
And there can be overlap, but it sounds like rest is a deeper, more abiding kind of um, just step off the ride for a minute.
Which
And
is biblical. When Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." Well, that's an intentional. You have to choose to come to him. You have to choose to lay down the worries of the day.
yeah, I want to ask you about that because whether it is a constant state of worry or just being revved up with fight or flight all the time, in a fear state, what actually happens in our brains and kind of how our brains then tell our bodies to function when we short it on rest, when we try to cheat the system, or maybe we're not even trying. Maybe we're just on this wheel of worry or fear, or we're trying to control things, all the things that keep us in a constant state of rev. What happens then, just from the brain side of things?
God gives us that fight or flight instinct to protect us from danger. But the way we live in culture today, and especially without taking time to rest, it's important for us to realize that our brain does not know the difference between positive stress and negative stress.
Oh, that's interesting.
So our brain does not know whether we're going to a wedding or a funeral, whether
Oh,
we're
wow.
stuck in traffic or whether we're on a roller coaster for fun. Our brain does not know the difference. And so when we are constantly going and not taking specific intentional time to rest, what is happening is that in that fight or flight natural response that God gave us for an emergency, our brain dumps cortisol into our system so that we can go out and attack or we can run away. But when we are constantly going and we're putting out fire after fire after fire, or to do after to do, our brain thinks we're in a constant state of emergency, and it's
Yeah.
still flooding us with that cortisol. And over time, cortisol was just meant for those brief instances to run away from that bear or whatever.
Right.
And when we're constantly flooding our system with cortisol, we can end up with significant health conditions as well as mental health conditions. But we can end up with adrenal fatigue,
Mhm.
chronic fatigue syndrome, heart disease. There's all sorts of different health conditions that come about because we've not given our body a chance to rest and rejuvenate.
Right. I'm glad
And
you
with
mentioned.
that can
Go
come
ahead.
mental health issues.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned. I just was reading a few studies before we hopped on. Some of there's studies showing that inadequate sleep can lead to dementia. There's of course all the other issues we've known about, that heart disease, obesity, stroke, depression. All of these things are big and important, and lack of rest and lack of sleep can lead to them. But I want to talk to you about one other thing that's kind of sneaky, because, like, heart disease and stroke, those are dramatic and big, and of course, we want to avoid those. But I read this morning that um, without proper rest, we can't form new memories.
That's right.
We can't. So think about that. Like, that to me is more real than this heart attack idea, which is big and extreme and out there. And of course, I want to avoid it. But man, if I'm thwarting the connections and the rejuvenation of those connections that can threaten my relationships, that gets me right here. And so that makes me want to sit up straight in my chair and pay attention to this idea of rest. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, and that kind of goes back to the idea that I was saying that we as a society tend to think that we can keep going and going and going without rest, and that we can multitask, but your brain cannot. And so your brain needs time to take in information, figure out what to do with it, assimilate it, store it before you can bring in more information. And so when we are skimping on the rest, then we're skimping on the consolidation of that input that we're trying to bring in that we need to remember for later,
Yeah.
which is why then down the road, you could see how it would lead to dementia,
Yeah.
because those with dementia can't store new memories.
Mm,
And not only can they not store new memories, but depending on the type of dementia, they have a slow degradation of old memories.
yeah. Yeah. I think that, man, that hits me where I live. I don't want to put that, I don't want to put the good stuff in peril. Okay, what did I not ask you that I should have asked you? What should our listeners today kind of know about rest, that would motivate them to maybe explore pursuing more of it?
What I think is so important that we make sure that we touch on before we stop our time together is that rest doesn't mean that you're laying down. I mean, it could be, but rest is anything that helps restore and rejuvenate. And so for me, it might be sitting by the water, or it might be taking a walk with my husband. While that could be considered physical exercise, that for me is a mental rest, if
Right.
you will. For someone else, rest might look like searching through their cookbooks and trying a new recipe. So what helps rest and restore for each person can be different. And there are different types of rest. There is that physical rest, but sometimes we have to also look at emotional rest. If we're spending around a lot of time doing things that are emotionally draining, we need to make sure that we're giving ourselves a break and doing something that's not dragging on our emotions. There's such a thing as social rest, and
Mm,
that we could get into the whole discussion of introvert versus extrovert. But in general, all of us need a rest from people and from the expectations of
mhm.
people. And we get that in different ways. So look for those things. Think about in the past, what things did you do that you came away feeling like now I've got more oomph to face the rest of the day? Maybe for you, rest is a phone call with a friend. But it's a matter of reconnecting with what did God put within me and my personality that I find kind of rejuvenates me, and do more of that. But you have to be intentional. If you don't plan rest into your day, it's not going to happen.
That is true. No one is going to gift you margin.
No.
To go get it. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate your wisdom and your insights. And friends, if you don't already follow Dr. B, go do it. Uplifting content every single day. All right, signing off for now. Thanks for your time.